This class is called the Urban Revolution. The Urban Revolution is the first of several different classes in a series about revolutions, like the invention of writing or the printing press or the Industrial Revolution and some other things related to mathematics, geometry, astronomy. Like there's so many different things. The world before the printed book and after the printed book is a completely different world. The world before the invention of writing and after the invention of writing is a completely different world. Writing was a revolution. The period before we started writing is called prehistory. So history is this revolution. People started writing things. And the urban revolution, which means the first time in history that people started living in cities and building houses and all of that. There's a lot to unpack here. And this particular revolution is a key. And the reason I think this is a key to a lot of the other ones is because a lot of the other inventions that happened in the world that are part of our society, that form our societies until today, began with the urban revolution in the area of the ancient Near East, which we're going to talk about today. So that's the key. So I would like to just everybody be familiar with some key concepts that are going to come up again and again and again. I want to start with a bit of a fun question. If you had these two guys, you have a hunter and you have this guy and you have this guy, the city guy, right? And you have them fighting each other. Who do you think is going to win? Number one, the hunter, or number two, the city guy? Now, I'm sure you'd all say the hunter, right? And you're probably right. The hunter would definitely win, even in a survival fight and all that kind of stuff. But there's something really interesting. Well, let's say if they're playing, I don't know, Fortnite or World of Warcraft, you know that the city guy is going to win, right? Because he's using the computer. But there's advantages to each one. Every single one has a different kind of world that they live in. We don't live in the hunter's world. We live in a city. We're not really hunters anymore. We have been changed. The revolution that changed the world for humanity is the urban revolution, meaning this is the urban revolution. This is really the story. And what we have to think about is how do we get here to a place where we now live in cities and we depend on cities? Now, I can promise you that you will gain a lot from learning how to be a good scout, from learning survival, learning to manage on your own, and living a little bit like a hunter for a day or two. But at the end of the day, you're going to go back home to your bathtubs, to your showers, running water, electricity, food in the fridge, supermarkets, right? At the end of the day, you're going to go back to being a city person. Even if you live on a farm today, right? We still benefit from cities. We get electricity from somewhere in the city where they're making the electricity for the city. So everybody's lives have changed because we now live in cities. So this is today's topic, the urban revolution and why do we live in cities? And it all begins in this very important place, which we call Mesopotamia, which we'll describe and see it on the map. And some of you already know this, I'm sure, but still it's worthwhile repeating this so we all know what we mean when we say that Mesopotamia is the cradle of civilization. It's where civilization was born, where all of the technological advances and science advances that we have today are much more advanced, but they all started in Mesopotamia. What is it about Mesopotamia, and more specifically, the area which we call the Fertile Crescent, which we're now going to see on the map? But you see that this is the shape of kind of a squiggly half moon, so that's called a crescent, like the crescent of the moon, the crescent moon. And it's this shape that's very green, that is very fertile, very good for growing things, which is where the first cities in history were built. Let's see this on the map now. So here we are. It might take you a second to figure out where we are because I'm looking at it deliberately from a funny angle. We are looking at the Fertile Crescent from the north. But if I zoom in, you'll see that this is the Nile River. And the Nile River is quite an amazing phenomenon. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. We also have the land of Israel right over here, the coast of Israel, which is also a little bit green. And finally, we have Mesopotamia, which is this area between two very large rivers. It's not the Nile because it's not in Africa, but this river is called the Euphrates, or in Hebrew, Prat. And the one in the north is called the Tigris, like a tiger. The Tigris, or in Hebrew, it's called Chidekel. The Prat and the Chidekel. And the area between these two rivers And these two rivers is called in Greek the between the rivers. And the way to say between the rivers in Greek is Mesopotamia. Meso as in the middle, like a mezzanine that's in the middle, or Mesoamerica is Central America is Mesoamerica, like Mexico and so on. And then there is potamos, which means river. Okay, just like a hippopotamus is a river horse. Okay, that's the area we called Mesopotamia and the cradle of civilization. As you can see, there's a lot of cities that I marked here on the map. These cities, Larsa, Uruk, Isin, Ur, are from the oldest cities in the world. It's believed that Uruk is the oldest city in civilization based on archaeological studies and all kinds of things. But these are the first cities. And you'll notice something that we even have Babylon here. You notice that they all have something in common. They are all sitting on water, on the rivers. And I want to stress that point today. We're going to talk about that a lot, and we're going to build upon that a lot. So let's zoom out for a moment, take a look at the whole planet. So we're looking at planet Earth, and you know that there's certain areas that because of their angle and distance from the sun and all that stuff, I'm not a geologist or an astronomer, but I'm saying in very general terms, this area around the world is a dry area. Okay, you see there, it's sort of drier, and then north of that is green, and south of that is green. We have tropic, etc. Right? So this is the Sahara Desert. And the Sahara Desert has one exception to the desert, and that is the Nile River. The Nile River actually begins with the monsoons in Central Africa and the African rainforest. So all of this area has so much rain, it's unbelievable. And the rain, because of just the shape of the terrain, which is sloping downwards and going between hills, over time, there's this river, the Nile, which was formed. So Egypt, and we'll talk a lot about Egypt in other classes, Egypt, the entire country of Egypt is entirely built around the Nile. You could see the borders of ancient Egypt from outer space. And if you look at this at night, there's beautiful satellite pictures. It's all lit up. The squiggly line, all the green area is all lit up, and everything else is dark because it's desert. You can't live in the desert. I mean, even today with modern technology, you sort of can, but you're dependent on water. So there's only so far people can go. So I don't know if there's anybody living in these areas here. Oh, yes, they are. This is a modern city, so we already have technology to be able to live here. Okay, so anyway, this is the Nile River, and we are talking about Mesopotamia. This is the area where the first centers of civilization, where human beings settled down and built cities. This is where it started, and it's all next to water. And Egypt is next to water. The large countries, empires of the ancient world are next to water. And there's another part of the world where there was an early beginning of civilization. It was slightly later, but it was here near India, the Indus Valley. This area is also one of the earliest places where human beings settled, and it was always near water, and cities and civilizations started thriving, instead of being, wanderers, traveling, hunter-gatherers, and all that stuff, which we're going to cover soon. But the first place it happened is definitely here, and this is where our focus is going to be. Okay? So I'd like to refer to this, since we're in the Torah reading, in the public reading of the Torah, we're in Bereshit. We're in the first book of the Torah, Genesis, Bereshit. We're talking about the foundations of civilization. I want to point out to you some stuff that you may have not noticed if you're following and if you're reading the Torah. You may have not noticed that these things are actually spoken about. And I want to highlight them. So I'm going to mention them in English, but I'm putting down the verses in Hebrew just because it makes it a little bit easier to make the connections, okay? So this is the area that's called the Fertile Crescent, which we just saw. It's the Nile River and the Tigris and the Euphrates. This whole area. And Mesopotamia simply means in Greek between the rivers. Meso means in between, and Potamia means river. Like a hippopotamus means a river horse. A river horse. That's just what it technically means, right? So as a hippopotamus, Mesopotamia means the area between the rivers, Mesopotamia, okay? So it's modern day Iraq, as you can see on this map. It's mostly Iraq, but sort of Syria, Turkey, a little bit as well. Okay, so this entire area is called the Fertile Crescent because it's crescent shaped. It's the shape of a crescent moon, and it's fertile. It's next to water, all right? So this is the beginning or understanding. Now, Let's look at the verses for a moment because it's a lot of fun. The four rivers that comprise Mesopotamia, the centers of civilization, are described as the beginning of civilization in the story of the Garden of Eden, which is very strange at first. So it says as follows. I'm just going to paraphrase, but you see that I basically enlarged the four rivers that come out into the world. And it says as follows, there's a river that comes out of Eden to water the garden, and it splits into four heads. One is called Pishon, which surrounds the land of Havilah, where there's a lot of gold. The other one is called Gihon, which surrounds the land of Cush, which is Sudan today. So we're talking about the Nile, and I'll show that to you in a moment. The third river is called Hidekel, which is to the east of Assyria, of Ashur. Hidekel is the Tigris River. And the fourth river is Prat, Euphrates. Okay? And you'll see this on the map. Here, let's jump back to our planet. And look, the Euphrates River is to the south, and to the north, this is the Tigris River. And now we have the Nile. Now, the Nile is actually listed as two different rivers. There's different ways to understand this, but let's keep it simple. That down in Central Africa, there's the Blue Nile and the White Nile. And those are two rivers that eventually combine. You see that right over here, and they become the Nile. They become the Nile, and that becomes one. So this is basically the four rivers. So if I show it to you now on the map, let's take a look at the four rivers. Here they are. The ones in green, Pishon and Gihon, which come from the south of Egypt. Basically, they're in Africa, and they flow north. And then the ones that flow south, the Tigris and the Euphrates, Hidekel and Prat. So this is really cool that it's mentioned in Genesis and Bereshit. It's just describing where the first cities were. Now, the center of civilization, where I just pointed out all these cities, is a land called Sumer, or Shumer, or Shinar, different names for it. You must know this picture. This is the ziggurat of Ur. It's a massive stepped pyramid sort of structure. It's a temple that was in the center of the major cities of the ancient world, and we're going to visit them. So we're going to start with the most important city, the city of Ur, known in Hebrew as Ur Kasdim, Ur of the Chaldeans, which is basically where Abraham comes from. Avraham, he's an Iraqi Jew, so to speak. It just wasn't called Iraq back then. So Abraham was probably Sumerian or something like that. He came from this area anyway, and he came to Canaan, which is really cool. So let's take a look at these places. We're going to go to Ur. Now you see how Ur is on the water, and if you look in the distance, you'll see that palace, that temple structure. Sorry, not a palace. Let's go to Ur. Welcome to Ur. Now, you're looking at it from above. We're going to land in a few moments, but there's no water to be seen. If you look carefully, if we have to zoom out until we see the Persian Gulf, you'll realize that the water used to be all the way up to the city. And eventually the water receded, and that's when the city basically was abandoned, because what's the point in living in the city if we're not next to the water, right? Everybody wants a beach house. We want to be in New York, we want to be in California, we want to be in Florida, right? People wanted to be in Ur. But then the water, moved further down, so the city was sort of abandoned. Now let's move into Ur and look at it up close. So here's Ur. You can see that there is remains of an ancient city. Let's ignore this stuff. This is all, I don't even know what's going on here. Modern, ancient digs, lots of weird stuff going on here. Anyway, this is an archaeological site. You see that there's they did preservation, so you could see the outline of the floors of the different rooms. So there's different rooms in here, but this is basically all archaeology. They dug here, and we'll see it soon. We'll see what they actually found here. It's incredible what they found here, really incredible. And this is the ziggurat. Let's take a closer look at it. So look, we're approaching the ziggurat. You see that everywhere else is sort of flat, and there's no hills in this area. It's a very flat kind of land. And here is the ziggurat. Let's look at it up close. Looking all the way up, there's some stairs back there, and then there's the main stairway up here. Now, you can see what the ziggurat is made of, yeah? What's the material that it's made of, this tower? Go ahead, Zoe.
It's made of bricks.
Right,
And that makes me think of the Tower of Babel.
Very good. The Tower of Babel, or Babylon, Migdal Bavel. This is connected in some way to the Tower of Babel, and we're going to talk about it soon. Like towards the end, we're going to end with the whole concept of the Tower of Babel. But that's a question because we also found one of these in Babylon. Is this the Tower of Babylon? And if so, so what's this all about? And what is it doing in Ur? So this is a very interesting question. Okay. Now there's a great picture of American soldiers when America came to Afghanistan and Iraq. You see American soldiers climbing up the ziggurat. Right now there is a fence over here, but I'm sure you could hop over it. I'd hop over it in 2 seconds. But anyway, don't tell anyone I said that. So you could climb all the way up to the ziggurat, and there used to be a temple up there on the top. And I want to show it to you, and we're going to jump and see another one in just a moment. So here's the ziggurat in the distance, and this is what we believe it looked like. We never found the temple on the top, but we sort of, it makes sense that it's there. It's pretty solid. Then you see that it's a very important building in the center of the city, and everybody's on their rooftops, and they're doing stuff, and there's palm trees, and they're having fun, and they're playing games, and it's all great. Anyway, so this is the ziggurat. Now I want to show you another really cool one. Let's visit another one of these ancient cities. We're going to leave Ur, where Abraham used to live, Avraham, and we're going to another city. This is the city of Uruk, or Erech. Now let's take a close look at this place from a sky view, and then we'll jump down again. So a lot of archaeology, you can see this is a city that nobody lives there, but they dug here, and they found all kinds of stuff. Let's take a closer look. So here are some more mud brick buildings, and if you look carefully, there is an Iraqi soldier or policeman. I'm not quite sure what the uniform is. You see him over here. It kind of looks like a soldier, but I could be wrong. And he's making sure that the people visiting here aren't stealing anything or pocketing any of these bricks, but they're visiting the ancient city of Uruk. Now, the reason the city of Uruk is important, let's jump ahead, is here's another ziggurat, which is not as well preserved as the one in Ur, but you see that there's these bricks. If you've been following in the past, we've seen bricks with the name of Nebuchadnezzar on them. This is what these kinds of bricks look like. They're mud bricks and stamped with names. So this is a ziggurat that's slightly less impressive just because of the wear and tear of time and it hasn't been properly excavated, but there's another one. So I want to show this to you. This is something really cool. I'm going to take you back to a verse. This is a picture of the ziggurat of Uruk. Now, Uruk is mentioned in Bereshit, in Genesis, as part of the kingdom of this epic king, this mythological king, or whatever you want to call him, this legendary king named Nimrod. Now, we don't know much about Nimrod, but one of the things it says is that the beginning of his kingdom was Babylon and Uruk and Akkad and Kalneh in the land of Shinar. V'tehi rashit mamlachto Bavel ve'erech ve'Akkad ve'Kalneh be'eretz Shinar. This is talking about Babylon. It's talking about Uruk. This is Uruk. Akkad, so Akkadian, that's like the area of Babylon, and Shinar is probably Shumer. So there are those who say that this is probably the king Naram Sin. I doubt that, but there's interesting discussions about it. Just so you know, we will meet this king in the end. I'm going to introduce you to a few highlights of kings from the ancient world from these cities. But why is Uruk important to us? Before we even get into the story of how we got to building cities, it's just fascinating. There is one of the oldest mythology stories in history is called the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was the king of Uruk. He goes out with his friend Enkidu, and they go to search for Utnapishtim, who's the Sumerian version of Noach, who escaped from the flood. Like, it's really cool that these nations, these ancient cultures, also have stories that are very similar to ours, and there's a lot to learn about them when you study them. So we're going to talk about this more. But let's move on to the next one. That was a bit of a teaser, and here we go. We're moving on to the next city. One more, and then we'll begin with the revolution part. So this is the city of Larsa. In the Bible, in Bereshit, it's called Elasar. Abraham actually has some kind of battle with the king of Elasar. His name is Aryoch, and there's some story there, but we'll talk about Abraham next week. So take a look. When you look closely, there's this really weird thing going on here. You see these funny squares all over the ancient city of Larsa? Look at that. If you zoom in, it looks like the floor plan of a ziggurat. See, there's kind of a sunken square where there's the foundations, and there's this extension here, which may have been a stairway. Now you think that's the ziggurat of Larsa, but let's zoom out, and you see that there's another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. Like, what is going? Is this like a ziggurat manufacturing station? What is going on here? I tried counting them. I lost track. So Larsa is basically full of temples. What is going on here? What are all these temples for? What is this? So this is a question we're going to get to in the end. We're going to end with this. We're going to talk about temples and kings and mythologies and gods and goddesses and the stories of the ancient Near East. Like, what is this all about? But this begins with the urban revolution. We don't find this with the tribes before there are cities. It has something to do with cities, even Greek mythology. So it's a really cool thing. So this being said, this is sort of our introduction to the question. Now let's go into to the real story. Okay. So first of all, I just had to put this here. The Tower of Babylon. Is the ziggurat actually the Tower of Babylon? Maybe yes, maybe no, but it's definitely connected to the story, and we're going to end with that. Okay. So let's begin our question. So here's our hunter-gatherers. Okay. Hunter-gatherers are the way human beings basically lived for many, many years, thousands of years. I'm not getting into how many thousands and whatever. The point is, for a very, very long time. This is prehistoric, like the Flintstones. Meet the Flintstones. So you have a yabba dabba do time. So they're hunter-gatherers. They hunt animals. They live in caves. They migrate. They move around. And they follow the food and they follow the animals wherever it goes. Okay? So I want to show you some examples of tools that hunter-gatherers would use that will help us understand what's the difference between hunter-gatherers and people who started living in little villages and eventually in cities, because it's the tools that they used that tell us what is really the things that changed. Okay, so let me show you something really cool. There's like a million museums that I can choose from, but I chose a museum in northern Israel, which is a major site for prehistoric human migration. It's called the Prehistoric Man Museum. See, there's some pictures here. There's all kinds of funky stuff. Anyway, let's see what else they have here. Into all that kind of stuff. Tools. Really cool. Axes. Okay. Masks and Flintstones and all kinds of stuff. This creepy stuff. We're going to jump in a moment. I'm just looking at the pictures that they posted online. I've never been to this museum, by the way. So all these really interesting tools that people lived in villages. Well, what do we see here? Gourds that were turned into canteens. I don't even know which tribes these are. There's like all kinds of different stories, all kinds of decorations. There's some tools. The Chalcolithic period is already when we're moving into villages. It's before it. We're trying to go earlier than that. So look at these big tools. Really cool things. These are all stone tools. You will not find pottery here. You know why you won't find pottery? Because to make pottery, you need fire. And they still didn't master fire yet. Okay, that's a fun thing to point out. We'll talk about that later. Okay, but there's all kinds of interesting tools that they used, even axes and all kinds of things. And there in the background, you see that there's like big elephants or mammoths and all kinds of skeletons. Oh, creepy stuff here. So check this out. We talk about elephants. There's actually an elephant skull somewhere in this museum. Somebody this morning in the class in Hebrew told it to me, but I was never here, so I don't know exactly where it is. But apparently there's an elephant skull here. But I'm going to show you a different one. So human beings would be hunters. They would hunt animals. So let's take a look at another example. I'm jumping into the Israel Museum just because there's some other stuff that you can see. When you walk into the Israel Museum's archaeology, it begins with the dawn of civilization. And check this out. Look at, in the words of Han Solo, look at the size of that thing. These are horns of a gigantic bull. They don't live anymore. We don't have bulls like that anymore. But this is what we call a lot of bull. It's a very big one. We have all these bones here below from different animals that people hunted. And what's really neat is the elephant. This is an elephant skull, which some people believed is a cyclops. When they found it, they thought it's the bone of a cyclops. This is a mammoth or a gigantic elephant skull, and it was found in Israel in a place called Gesher Benot Yaakov, the Benot Yaakov Bridge, which is in the north next to the Jordan River. It was basically a prehistoric elephant graveyard. A prehistoric elephant graveyard that it's where prehistoric hunters and gatherers would sit and basically eat their game. They would eat this elephant, and it would take a very long time to eat it. So this was where they all sat. I don't even know why. That was just like where they did it, where prehistoric people would sit down, I guess, around a bonfire or something, and they would eat these elephants. And for all we know, they told stories of grandeur. I don't know, kind of like in Brother Bear, if you've seen that movie. So this is kind of cool. Okay, so what does it mean to be a hunter and a gatherer? Take a look. A hunter means you have all these tools to hunt, and this is a cave where prehistoric people would hide during the winter and collect their things. You hunt animal or it's game, and you bring it home to your family, to your tribe, and you eat it, right? Or you do the other thing. Let's jump ahead, and you go ahead and you cut down grains and collect them, or berries or things like that, and you bring them home and you eat them, right? So that's gathering. You hunt and you gather, basically animals and plants. Now, that all changes when we move into small villages and we start having farmers and shepherds. This is where the change begins. The urban revolution begins when people stop running around looking for animals and they start growing the animals themselves in their home, in their village. This is part of the revolution that completely changed our lives. Okay? So let's see some things that hunter-gatherers use. As they move slowly into villages, they're using them more and more, but they're still kind of hunters and gatherers living in villages. So take a look at these different tools. So check out these really, really sharp arrowheads. These things can really cut, and they're made from stone, not from metal. They didn't really use metal yet. This is not a bow and arrow, by the way. This is a sharpener that spins. So it creates this. It looks like it makes fire, but I think this is more for sharpening. Here's some more tools, an axe and some other, a hammer maybe. And then we have these. What are we looking at? Take a close look. I'm going to highlight this so you see what we're looking at. These are little flintstones, very sharp blades that are then carefully placed into some kind of a handle. See that? I'll show you the other ones here below. Little, very sharp blades that are put inside a jawbone of some animal. This is a sickle. It's used for cutting grains.
I think it's a scythe. A scythe?
Yeah, scythe and sickle. Chermesh magal. Yeah. Okay.
A scythe is the thing that like the Grim Reaper holds.
Yeah, but that's really big.
Okay. So, but anyway, the point is these are tools that are used for hunting and for gathering food. And then there's these really cool things that are called grindstones. Now, this grindstone is used to grind the grains into flour and to eat them and to do stuff with them. So that's really cool. And we actually have some grains here. If you look carefully, they actually found some seeds of different plants, so we know what people used to eat when they started moving into villages and they would gather these things. Now, this is all kind of cool stuff, but this is still not quite a city. We're still talking about hunter-gatherers who are now living in bungalows or tents and teepees and things like that. But they're still hunters and gatherers. So this guy, if you're familiar with the Maasai tribe who live in Africa, in Nairobi, the Maasai are very, very tough hunters and warriors, but today they're also very friendly. You can go and visit them and take pictures with them, and they're very nice to tourists. I know I've never been, but I know a lot of people who've met them. I've seen pictures. They're really nice people, but they're very tough. And they sometimes walk like half of Africa on foot, and they go hunting and they gather and they have war dances, and they have this really weird belief that all of the cows in the world belong to them. Weird stuff. But anyway, they're very tough warriors, and they live in villages. So they're still hunter-gatherers, but they have an advantage that they also live in villages and they have some animals that they keep there and all. It's really interesting. Okay, but how did we get from this to this? Okay, what are the changes that turned hunter-gatherers or villagers into city dwellers? There is a very big difference between cities and hunter-gatherers and villages, and now we're going to talk about them. So I'm going to show you some tools and things that they use, and we're going to talk about all the different things that put together the urban revolution. And it's all connected to water. It all begins with water, as we'll see in a moment. Before we do that, I just want to show you some verses that from the Torah, from Bereshit, that put this together so that we have an idea of how the urban revolution is described in our sources, which it actually is in a very interesting way. We spoke about the four rivers, right? The cradle of civilization. And finally, we have the first city. And the first city is described in the story of Cain and Abel, where Cain is jealous of his brother and he kills his brother, and then he's cursed that he can't settle the land anywhere. And there's some kind of compromise where God says, okay, nobody's going to kill you, but he builds a city. So that's just background. I'm not getting into the whole story. But what matters is he builds a city. And here's some psukim, some verses that if you're not a historian, you might just read through them and not really pay attention. And I'd like us to just pay attention to what it says. So Cain basically goes out there, he builds a city, and he calls the city after his son Chanoch. So he names his son Enoch, Chanoch, and he calls the city after his son. He names it. Okay. And what happens then, we talk about his descendants who are living in the city. And he has a bunch of descendants, Yaval, Yuval, Tuval. They all have a very similar name. Yaval, he is the father of herders and shepherds. So they're starting to settle down and domesticate animals, sheep or goats. And his brother Yuval, he was a tofes kino ve'ugav. He starts playing music. Now, playing music is an interesting thing. As we'll see towards the end, it's a very important thing. And finally, we have this Tuval Cain, who is a lotesh. He works with gemstones, so with rocks, with stones, he makes pretty things out of them. And kol choresh nechoshet ubarzel, people who work with metals and with copper, and they make things and they make tools. What does this mean? It means that once you have a city, let's do this by comparison, okay? Let's compare the professions of hunter-gatherers to the professions of people in the big city. Okay, of course, we're jumping ahead, but the big city is not the same thing as a hunter-gatherer. How many different professions are there if you're a hunter? So let's think. Everything around hunting. Knowing how to track animals, right? That's not exactly a profession. A hunter is a profession. Knowing how to make the tools. So you cut stones and you collect wood and you make strings and you spin rope. You make traps. That's all part of hunting. Then there's, I guess, knowing how to light fire and cooking things and maybe making clothes out of the animal skins or hide and things like that. There's not that many things to do. If you move into a village, maybe you know how to make a mud house or build houses, a little bit of fishing. There's not that many jobs. It's possible for one human being to learn all of the jobs that exist in that society, all of them. Okay? So let's just now say that you're a hunter-gatherer. You are self-sufficient. You're independent. You know how to do everything. You can survive. Now let's move into the big city. How many different professions do we have in a city? There's people who make different kinds of things. There's administration people. There's lawyers. There's secretaries. There's shoemakers. There's doctors. There's bakers. There's builders. There's fishers. There's a million different things. There is not a single person who could possibly know everything that there is to know in the city. It's impossible, right? Let's give an example that you can relate to, okay? So in the city, we have so many different professions, nobody can do everything. So for example, if your phone breaks, right, or your computer breaks, or your toy breaks, or your bike falls apart, you go to someone who knows how to fix it, right? Maybe you know how to fix some of these things, but usually you depend on somebody else. Where does your food come from? I'll tell you two funny stories, okay? One of them, there's this famous line, and everybody knows this, it's on the internet, I read this. This girl who was so shocked when she heard that people eat animals. She's like, I don't understand. Why do you have to eat the animal? Can't you just buy hamburgers in the supermarket? People, because they have no idea where their food comes from. Now, the other story, and I heard this on a podcast, there's this guy who was talking about hanging out with real hunter-gatherers, like in the Amazon or something like that. He hung out with them for a long time, and he's trying to explain to them our lifestyle, okay? So this tribesman asks him, so I don't understand, where does your food come from? He says, well, the supermarket. But how does it get there? So he tries to explain to him, and then the hunter goes like, are you telling me that somebody else hunts for you? That's impossible. This is crazy. Who would want to eat something that someone else hunted for them? It's a completely different lifestyle, okay? So we live in the city. Somebody else is getting the food for us. Sometimes we don't even know where it comes from or how it gets to our table. You just go out and buy it, okay? So in a city, we all depend one on the other. And what's interesting today, before we continue with our inventions and developments, is that because of the internet and technology and high-speed travel, like airplanes, we call the whole world a village, a global village, because you can reach almost every country in the world easily, order things from there, make stuff from there. You probably are wearing something or using something that was produced, manufactured by at least 3 or 5 different countries. And you just went to Macy's or JCPenney or whatever and Marshall's and bought it. Right? You have no idea how it got there. So we're a global village and we rely one on the other. So that's a really interesting thing. But now let's get back into our story. I'm going to take us to, first of all, let's talk about inventions, okay? So we mentioned this earlier, the concept of domestication, of bringing animals into our home, okay? This is one of the changes that completely changed the way human beings live. Farm animals, pets, and so on. First of all, it's a lot of fun, right? Who doesn't want to? I mean, I don't know about you guys. We have chickens across, like our guy next door, our neighbor has chickens. We're building a chicken coop. We have sheep down like a 10-minute drive from us. We have a farm. It's different when you live next to animals. It's so much fun, right? What is the value of domesticating animals? Why is it that people did that? Okay, so first thing I'm going to talk about is the regular farm animals. How many different things do they provide for us? So think about it. And what did we do beforehand? Right? So milk, eggs, wool, leather. We have pets, guard animals, shepherd dogs, right? We have animals that take care of this, animals that take care of that, and of course, animals, people eat animals. So we have all these different things that animals can do for us. How is this a difference from hunter-gatherers? Because the animals they're no longer out there, right? You don't have to go and find them. You raise them here. And that saves us a lot of time. It helps us in a lot of different ways. But there's another thing that has to do with domestication. Let's jump to the next part of the museum. And we are looking at tools from the time of the first temple. But these tools are tools that were used by, well, see if you could figure out what these different things are, right? What are these different things? Here, I'm going to circle them so you can see them. The important ones are the big ones. I don't care too much about the little axe. What are these
The
things?
biggest one is for farming.
But it's for farming. Good. It's for farming. So we're talking about animals and farming. What is it?
To plow.
Very good. This is a plow. Yes. And the plow is attached to a cow. Well, actually to a bull, right? And that brings us to the next thing, which is this. This is a nose ring for a bull. It's huge, right? Because a bull is big. And then this thing is a pitchfork, right? So it's used for farming. So this is already a well-established city. You see that they also have weapons and they have money. This is already much, much, much later. But the point is, we are now talking about cities. And in cities, you have agriculture, farming. We're using the animals to help us produce more and take more advantage of the land. It's not just that I have to go and pick things. I grow them here, and I grow a lot of them. So that's connected to domestication, farming. It's all connected. Grains, vegetable, fruits, all that stuff that we used to have to go out and gather as farmers, as tribesmen, is now growing next to our home. That's a tremendous advantage. Now, before we move on to perhaps the most important thing that's going to connect to everything else, I want to show you some really cool things. So first of all, so here's a real plow, and you see that the farmer is holding some kind of stick, right? And there's also a nose ring in the bull, right? It holds his mouth. So somehow he's carrying a yoke, he's pulling. You use the bull's power to make deep holes in the earth, and then you plant. right? So this is a very important thing that comes with the domestication of animals. And think of the difference that this makes. If you're a hunter-gatherer, you're dependent on what animals are around. You have to follow animal migration, for example. You have to stalk them. You have to hunt them. You have to chase them. It's dangerous business, okay? You can get eaten by a lion while you're doing that, right? And then you also have to go and find grains and berries and stuff. And now you're growing them yourself, and you're growing tons of it, a lot of it. You could feed your whole family without having to go far. This is an amazing thing. Now look at this one. Can anybody tell me or guess what country this is from? This is ancient.
Egypt.
That is correct. This is from an Egyptian tomb, and this is an Egyptian farmer using a plow being pulled by two bulls, and you see that the farmer is also holding a stick in his hand. So not much has changed in thousands of years, right? This is 3,000-4,000 years old from a tomb in ancient Egypt, right? So plowing. Now I just want to mention one thing that's related to the Torah as well, and that is the name Noach, Noah, who survived the flood. The story of Noach has a lot to do with farming. We have a very ancient Jewish tradition that the reason he was called Noach is because he or his generation invented the plow, which reversed God's curse on the land, which has to do with Adam's sin, which was the land was cursed. So because you now have the plow, you can now turn the land into blessing again. So his name is Noach, to say Now my father was doing this tour in Turkey. He's a tour guide, okay? He took a group to Turkey, to Mount Ararat, which is the mountain in Turkey where it says that the ark landed. So it's really cool just to go see what's that hill, Ararat. People knew it. And in the village below, it's like on the border of Turkey and Armenia, there's a big sign there that says that according to local traditions, this is not a Jewish tradition, according to local traditions in Ararat, farming began in this part of the world. That's really cool. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out. Now let's get to our very important detail. We're going back to Mesopotamia, the two rivers. Now check this out. This is the Euphrates River. We're looking at Nahara Prat. And check this out. There's these massive rivers, but then suddenly the rivers dwindle. Okay? So what exactly is going on here? What happened to the river? And what do you see all around the river? What's going on here? What are these green blocks?
Fields.
Fields for farming. And why are they next to the river?
For them to get water to grow.
You need to get water. Very good. Now, what is this structure that you see? We see one here, and there's another one right over here. Is this the one? Yes. There's a few of them. What is this thing?
It's a dam.
That's correct. This is a dam, which is basically a structure that sort of blocks the water and lets out a little bit at a time. So that creates a lot of water pressure, which turns these turbines that creates electricity, because the city needs electricity. That's how we have electricity. That's one of the ways we have electricity. Like there's the Hoover Dam in the United States, right? There's all these different dams all over the place. But it also controls the water so it doesn't all run away, and then you can use it for the farms, all this farmland. That is one of the inventions that have to do with living around the water. One of the key inventions of the urban revolution, irrigation. This is irrigation. Now, all the major rivers in the world today, if I'm not mistaken, have a dam somewhere. The Nile has dams around it. The Jordan River has a dam, the Degania Dam next to the Kinneret. Dams are necessary for electricity today, but also for irrigation. And in the ancient world, of course, dams weren't as sophisticated as today, but take a look at this picture of ancient Ur, as we imagine it was. It was on the river. There's water everywhere, and the water is used. Take a look at this picture. It's a beautiful picture. I found this on Pinterest. There's found a lot of great pictures there. You can spend forever there. So check this out. If you look into the distance at the horizon, you'll see the temple, the ziggurat of Ur, and all these palm trees. But look how many different functions you have for water. You see this? So this water, I don't even know if this is realistic, but they sort of made this island where there's sheep grazing on grass, and then there's this bridge which you could probably lift so the sheep won't escape. I don't know if that they really did that or not. I have no clue. And you see a person with a plow and bulls making, plowing the land, and then there's people on boats. And some boats are round and some boats are more like canoes. And so this is all part of life. You need water to drink, but it's also for irrigation and for growing things. Okay. Here is where the big changes happen. What do you do with all of this grain? So I want to remind you of two things before we go to another site. Okay? Actually, we'll go to the site first. We're going to the city of Megiddo in northern Israel. This is a biblical city where the first recorded battle in human history happened around here. If you've heard the name Armageddon, that literally means the Battle of Megiddo. So this is a kind of a fun area, Megiddo National Park. And anyway, so let's use this city as an example, even though it's a much later city. It's a biblical city. It's way past the urban revolution. Okay. Once you have so much grain, first of all, you don't have to be a farmer because Joe is the farmer. He's Trader Joe's, right? You don't need to grow stuff yourself. You have all this time to do other things, like we saw in the verse, the story of the first city, right? You can work with gems, you can work with jewelry, you can make clothing, you can work with animals, you can do artwork, you can make music. I don't need to do everything myself. Someone else is doing it. I don't even have to know how to do it. You can go to a farmer's market, and there's the farmers who grew the food themselves, and they bring it to you, right? So this is one of the changes. What do you do when you have so much produce or surplus, tons and tons of grain? What do you do with all of it? Like it's more than you need for surviving. We've moved beyond the hunter-gatherer who hunts as much as he needs and doesn't eat anymore, right? What do you do with all of this stuff? So let's move into the city. There's this big round structure that you could sort of see from a drone view, from an aerial view. See it in the center of the city. But let's move up and close to it. What on earth is this?
It's a granary.
A granary.
We were actually there.
You were there. Really cool at Tel Megiddo, right? It's amazing. They also have an underground water cistern, which is also important to bring the water into the city, right? So that's a really cool one. If you did that, it's a really cool walk, right? And then you show up at the other side of the city. It's really cool. So this granary was basically a storehouse for grain. And if you look back out, you'll see that all around the city is farmland. This is modern farmland, obviously, but in ancient times, this was farmland, and the grains were collected in granaries and stored in cities at large amounts. This is more than a person can ever eat in a year, and this is for a whole city. Now, by the way, if you might wonder, why doesn't it get like moldy or ruined or spoiled? The truth is that if you cover it with chaff, the leaves of wheat, it actually insulates it and keeps it fresh, which is an amazing thing. They had all these really cool techniques. Today we have cooling facilities, but they didn't have that back then. Okay, so this is a granary, really cool. Everybody's looking down at it. You can't climb down it, but you can see it. It's really deep. Okay, so we're almost at the end, but we've now reached a critical point where we understand the power of living in cities with all of the inventions. Storage gives you security. What kind of security am I talking about? Yeah, go ahead. Who wants to say? What kind of security is it?
You have food, so you can store food for your animals and for people and stuff like that.
Right. So that gives you a sense of security because
You won't starve.
you won't starve. I always have food to go to.
You'll never run out of food.
Right, hopefully, or at least it'll take a long time. Right. Now, I want to remind you all, some of you might be a little bit too young to remember this, but it's not that long ago. It's just 3 years ago, maybe 4. Yeah, 4 years ago, when COVID hit, right? Everybody was locked up in their homes, and people were like buying everything off the shelves, including toilet paper. You could not find toilet paper anywhere in the United States. It was crazy, right? Like everybody was like going crazy because they wanted security. Right? So you remember that, Zoe, right? People wanted security. Now, when this war started in
Yeah.
Israel, right, my wife and I went out and we actually bought food for like 3 months. Huge things of like 10 pounds of rice and lots of cans and lots of stuff because you never know. We even bought canisters for gas in case there's nowhere to go. Like we got everything. Lots of water because you need security. Cities provide security. Hunter-gatherers don't have security. They never know if they're going to have food. You have to go out there and hunt. When you have storage, you have so much surplus, you can make so much, you can store it, you have security, right? So I'm just going to, before a question, I just want to show you a couple of things. So this storage facility is one of the most ancient centers in the world. It's in Turkey. We'll talk about it another time when we talk about the invention of writing, which is another revolution, but it was actually like has to do with this place, which was a granary inside some kind of temple. So it's a public building where they store stuff. And here's one, I found this on the internet. This is a picture of some kind of village, but you see these little silos, these little round rooms, which you basically fill them up to the top and cover them with stuff, and that protects stuff. So this is all surplus. This is all security.
When we had COVID happen here, everybody was out buying toilet paper. My mom was just like, "Why are you getting toilet paper? Like that's gonna feed your family?" And she made a little bit of a joke out of it, and it was kind of funny. We had been preparing for emergencies for a while. So we were prepared, but we've just found it particularly hilarious that people were grabbing toilet paper of all things, like toilet paper.
Well, when you gotta go, you gotta go.
It wasn't food. It wasn't like stocking their rooms with food. It was toilet paper. Like
you have to understand that
toilet paper to your kids.
That people in Israel were laughing at that. They're like, these Americans are such city people that they have no idea what the really important things are and what the not important things are. Okay, fine. But yeah, it was very funny. We have those funny memories. So now let's move on. So once we have so much surplus and everybody's doing different things because you don't need to do everything yourself, this is where it gets really interesting. What do we do with all of this stuff that we have? We now have so much, right? Well, there's people down the river who might not have so much, or they might want what we have, right? You start moving in between cities. And this is one of the things that water allows us to do. Because when you have water, you have trade. Now we can talk about trade. Now remember that we're living on the water. The first cities in the world are all along water. And remember that that's important for more than one reason. It's not just drinking water. It's not just irrigation. It's also trade. You can get from one place to the other. And that opens up a whole world of opportunities because look at these different things, how they're all connected to the things that we've spoken about. Let's start from the top right. You have different professions. So you have somebody who has animals and they make cheese and butter and milk, for example. I don't know if they actually did that back then. They actually did know how to make butter. We found proof of that. But the point is there's different professions. Now you want to ship these things somewhere else. Well, what are the things that you need to ship things? Well, pirates or thieves, you need protection, so you're hiring guards. You need a way to ship the things. You need storage vessels, and you also need where to store the things when they get to different places, right? And ships and all that stuff. All of this stuff creates wealth. This is a concept that hunter-gatherers did not understand because everybody had what they needed and you survive. But suddenly you have storage and you're trading and you suddenly become rich. This was a concept that was new. Okay, and that brings us, believe it or not, to our final stop for today, the British Museum. Now, the British Museum, you see that there's this nice little funky shape, this green sort of curved roof. We're going to now go underneath it and look up. And somebody did some kind of digital art. I don't know how you do this on Google Earth, but there's a I think it's called tile overlay, but they basically created digital art and they put it into Google Earth. So like somebody coming in from the roof and stealing this big Easter Island statue that we know from Night in the Museum. You dum-dum, give me gum-gum, you know, that guy. So they just made this. It's kind of fun. I really have no clue how they did this, but it's really cool. And we're going to go up the stairs, this round staircase, and at the very top, we enter the ancient Near Eastern galleries. See, that's where we are. And let's move inside. And here is where we're going to see the surplus, the wealth, and the other things that came with it. And this is where we're going to end. And hopefully we'll end in about 10 minutes, if that's okay. I know that we're a little over time, but we're having a lot of fun, hopefully. Okay. So take a look. First of all, this is iconic. This golden helmet belonged to a Sumerian king. It's I've seen this on covers of encyclopedias. This is a very famous piece. It's gold. Okay, these people are rich. I don't think tribal people cared much for gold. Okay, these people are rich. Now check out this. Tell me if you recognize this place. See that? Why are we here? Because the British excavated, they dug in Ur, and they dug the Royal Cemetery of Ur, and this is what these rooms here in the British Museum are all about. So we're going to see a bunch of these things, even that character over there, we're going to end with him. Okay, so check this out. One of the things we found in these royal burials in the cemetery of Ur, this really weird little thing here. Look at this. There's looks like a goat that's climbing on a tree and eating it. This goat is made of gold and lapis lazuli, a very precious blue stone, and seashell or something like that, as well as this, the Royal Standard of Ur, as it's called, that shows people doing things, and it's made of blue. I mean, this is incredible. These people were rich. Now, speaking of expensive things, check out what this woman would wear. So they found all of these, I mean, there are tons of stuff. I'm just showing some highlights in the British Museum. Like, look at this golden knife with a handle made of lapis. I mean, this is crazy stuff, right? This is like taking your iPad and covering it with diamonds. I mean, that's basically what this was. Okay, so they found all of this jewelry in the royal burials of Ur, and they had to painstakingly put it back together. And it looks like it's what the royal women of Ur 4,300 years ago would wear. And here's the jewelry up close. I mean, look at this stuff. These earrings, by the way, are very heavy. Pure gold is really heavy, and there's all these different things. So this is one aspect of their wealth, and that comes from being next to water, having trade, having professions, and having a surplus in agriculture and farming animals, and all that stuff comes together to becoming rich. Ur, where Abraham comes from Ur, was the center of civilization 4,300 years ago. It was the New York City. That's where the stock market was. That's where everything was. All the trade routes of everything important in the ancient world went through Ur. And that brings us to these things. We're almost finished, but I want you to see these instruments. Take a look. One of these is reconstructed. The wood is not the original, but look at this thing. This is a bull's head made of lapis and gold. This is like, these people are rich. It's like you make your guitar out of platinum. I mean, this is insane, right? They're wealthy. And check this out. And they buried it. They buried it. That's how much they had. Let me move to the other side. You'll see another instrument. Here's another one. So these are reconstructed, but these are from the earliest instruments that we have, and they're made of gold. I mean, and here's a picture from the Standard of Ur that shows somebody holding this instrument, right? That standard that's right over there. So that's really neat. But it gets even better when you look at this thing. What is, one second. Here, what is this? You see that? Now, if you go to the British Museum, you can buy a copy of this. We're gonna watch maybe 2 minutes of this video, but I'm gonna send it to you. I'm gonna post it on the chat. This is a movie about one of the most famous games in the world until backgammon and chess took its place. People used to know, up until the time of the Greeks, people knew how to play this game. This is the royal game of Ur. And I want to pull this all together before our final stop that has to do with kings and mythologies, and to understand why music and games are important. This brings us to the concept of leisure and games. Leisure and games. Having leisure and games, music and games and all that stuff, the reason this is so important is because when you live next to water and you have domesticated animals and you start having a lot of farming, surplus, and then you start trading with other cities, you start getting rich and rich and rich, and you have storage and you have all of these things come together, you have security. And so you could suddenly say, Mom, Dad, I'm bored. Now, if you're a hunter, there's no such thing as bored because you don't know what you're going to eat tomorrow. You're either going out to hunt or you're worried about getting eaten by someone, some animal. You don't have boredom. But when you live in the city and you have security, so suddenly you find yourself with all this free time. What do you do with it? So today we have, we watch movies and whatever, we play games, but this is what you do when you're living in a city and you have security. You start coming up with games and music and pastime. So that's something I had to mention. And finally, one last thing with this we're going to end is the concept of administration and social order and hierarchies. What do I mean? There's different roles in a city. When you're a hunter, everybody does the same thing. Everyone does the same thing. You can be a little bit older and be like the elder of the village and teach younger people how to do the things that hunters do, but everybody does the same thing. They're all doing the same thing. But when you're in the city, there are so many different jobs to do. So you have to come up with one person who manages this and another person who keeps track of that and a person who protects this and a person who does this. And there's so many different things to do. You simply need an administration. You need somebody who can keep things together. And that's what this library from Nineveh, which we saw at a few other times, is all about. A king's library, keeping track of different things, who paid their taxes, who collected, where are the things going. You have to keep track of things. Once you have water, surplus, domestication, security, travel, trade, wealth, and all that stuff, you need somebody to keep track of all this. That's where administration comes in. We suddenly need administrators. We need a hierarchy. There's one person on the top or people on the top. There's people below them. There's people who take care of this, people who take care of that. There's a social order. This did not exist in tribal society. And even in villages, to a very limited extent. With cities, it is necessary because everything is bigger and larger and faster and stronger, and you need an administration to run the show. And this is where kings come into the story. Kings were basically invented in cities. You don't have kings in tribes. So I'm going to briefly introduce 3 different artifacts that have to do with ancient kings, and then we're going to end with mythology, which is kind of a teaser for a future class about mythology. We're just going to touch it a little bit. We're not getting into too much, okay? So this block over here, I actually did a video about it that I shared. I did this last year. It's called the Sumerian Kings List. Now, the Sumerian Kings List actually lists the first kings of Sumer. Some of them are these like legendary kings who lived for tens of thousands of years, like crazy stuff. And like that's what they claim, right? And it divides them as the kings who lived before the flood and after the flood. And like, why are they talking about the flood, right? Well, apparently there was some kind of flood that these kings are talking about. This is a list of the kings, and it's in London also in the Ashmolean Museum. So that's one thing. Now let's meet 2 very famous kings. This is the victory stela of Naram Sin, who was the uniter of Sumer and Akkad, which is kind of like an empire. It's not quite an empire, but we call it the empire. And this is his picture on the right. He's stepping on top of the people he conquered, and you see he's defeated them, and he's climbing and ascending up to the mountain where there are these they look like daisies, but they're actually the sun or the moon or something. He's climbing up to the top. You see that? On the top of the hill on the left. So this is in the Louvre in Paris today. But Naram Sin, some people say this may be the Nimrod of the Bible. I'm not convinced, but they talk about this. But in any event, he was an ancient conqueror. And the fact that he's ascending to the mountain, and there's the gods, the stars that represent the gods looking at him, tells you that he was made king by blessing of the gods. He's a ruler by divine right. The gods made me king. Right? Where does that come from? We'll find out. And here's another famous king. His name is Hammurabi. Ever heard of Hammurabi's Code? Very famous. He was a king of Babylon from around the time of Abraham. And he's seen here. It's also in the Louvre. All the nice stuff is in the Louvre. And he is here on the right. That's just the top part of this. There's the king Hammurabi standing, sort of honoring the sitting king, who is the sun king, or as his name is in Akkadian, Shamash, which is like the Hebrew Shemesh for sun. So he is Shamash, the sun god, and the sun god is giving him the staff of justice. You shall be the just ruler of Babylon, and everybody must follow your code. It's a code, as the pirates in Pirates of the Caribbean say. They have to follow the rules. So that's a really interesting thing. And before we wrap this all up, I just want to show you that this picture is on the Central Bank of Iraq. It's on their banknote, 25,000 dinars, which is like $5. So you see, there's Hammurabi, and there's the bulls from the Ishtar Gate, and the arch of the Ishtar Gate, and the Tower of Babel on the top left, like all that stuff. It's all on their money. It's their history. Okay, fine. Final stop. Temples, mythology, idols, priests, worship, kings, gods, all that stuff is all related to the urban revolution. I'm going to wrap this up with a bit of again, this is a little bit of a teaser, so we're just touching on it a little bit. But check out this guy over here, okay? I'm jumping to the other side of the room. These are from the temples of Sumer. And take a look. What is this creature? Some kind of winged lion or something who's holding on to these two stags, and kind of cool. This is from some kind of temple, and in the temple we find all these really cool things, like these shiny bronze, except they rusted and turned green, shiny bronze lion's head that were supposed to look really scary when they were shiny and didn't fall apart. Animals, bulls, ducks, all kinds of cool stuff. This is like a beautiful pillar that was found there from a temple on some King Gudea, by the way, who's just been broken off. And then there's all these guys. What on earth is this guy doing? And all the guys behind him. What's he doing? What's this?
Worshipping.
Worshipping, right? Or, that's a good. What's another word for it? That's good.
Praying.
He's praying. Worship. He's praying. Or he's just going like, excellent, right? Right. But no, he's praying. These are statues of people who are praying to the gods. Now, this is something that we do not find with hunter-gatherers or villages. This is something that is born when cities exist. And I'd like to tie this all together, and here's where we're going to wrap up. All right, so thank you for your patience. How are these things all connected? Greek mythology is the order of the way the heavens work and how the world came into being according to Greek belief, right? And that trickles down to how society is supposed to conduct itself, right? So these are the 12 Olympian gods of Greece. Then you have the Egyptian mythology, which has to do with how the world was created and how everything is ordered and explains the world to you and explains the kings to you and all that kind of stuff. And then we have the earliest mythologies that we have found records of, which is the Babylonian mythologies. And the Babylonian or the Akkadian, the Canaanite mythologies, like this is the battle of Baal and Yam, which we'll talk about at another time. But these are ancient mythologies. The most important one for our story is what's called the Enuma Elish, which means when on high, which is just the opening words of the Babylonian creation story, Enuma Elish. And the critical story is Marduk, the god of Babylon, whose symbol is the dragon, who fights Tiamat, who is the scary reptilian monster of the seas. And when he defeats Tiamat, Marduk rips her body and creates the heavens above and the earth below. And then he builds the city of Babylon, which means, Bab'ili means the gate of the gods. Bab'ili. That's what it means. Very similar to Hebrew and Arabic, by the way. Okay? So that's Marduk is the key story in the creation myth of the Babylonians. Now let's put this all in perspective and wrap this up, okay? I want to show you a verse and then I'll wrap up the story, which has to do with the Tower of Babel. So we have the different professions in the first city, which we mentioned earlier in Bereshit and Genesis, all these different professions, and what happens immediately after that is amazing, because then it says in the generation of Enosh, Az huchal likro b'shem Hashem. People started calling things, all these different random things, they called them gods. That happens after the cities are founded. So we have Zeus on the right, but we have the thunder god Baal on the left, holding a lightning bolt. And this is from Mesopotamia. This actually predates the Greeks. The Greeks copied them, which we'll talk about another time. So this is a really cool thing. How are these things all connected? Why is mythology, idolatry, so central to people in cities all over the world? And here's the simplest answer. So we have kings, right? kings are basically rulers by divine right, right? And then there's temples, mythology, idols, priests. The king is sort of like a priest for the gods. Everybody has to worship the gods and worship the king and all that stuff. And this is the social order. So it explains the order in the heavens and how that connects to the order here. And that's why you have to pay your taxes. Got it? It's a way of controlling people. It's a way of giving them an understanding of the world. Now I understand. Oh, so the king is kind of like the gods above, but he's the human one, and we bring offerings to the temple, and then everything stays, and the gods will make it rain, and our lives will be good. That's the basic story, which was only happening in cities. So what we're going to end with this. Is the ziggurat the Tower of Babylon? I don't know, but it's definitely related to the story because it's all about central control, keeping people together, and social order. That's what the story of the Tower of Babylon is about. And there's this beautiful mosaic picture from Hukok where you see everybody building the tower together. This is from a synagogue in Israel, an ancient synagogue. And suddenly in the middle, you see two people starting to fight with each other. And the story of Babylon is God basically said, I don't like this idea of too much central control and everybody thinking the same way. Let's mix things up a little bit. And they start mixing up their languages, and then nobody understands each other, and they start beating each other up, and basically the tower gets abandoned. That's the story of the Tower of Babylon, which is kind of a criticism on the way the societies were functioning at the time. So that was the urban revolution. We jam-packed a lot now, so thank you so much for your patience. We learned a lot of different things, and we learned that the urban revolution is all connected to water and the different inventions around domestication and farming and trade and security and storage, and finally social structures, orders, kings, and gods. It's all connected to the urban revolution.